The polished marble floors of the Ethelgerd Technologies headquarters gleamed under the soft, expensive lights. It was a Friday evening, and the usual quiet hum of computers and hushed phone calls had been replaced by something far more lively. Laughter and the gentle clink of glasses echoed through the vast atrium. It was the company's annual gala, a night where ties were straightened, dresses sparkled, and success was measured in champagne. Flutes and confident handshakes. At the center of it all was the CEO, a man in his late 50s, with sharp eyes and silver hair perfectly combed. He moved through the crowd not like a guest, but like a captain on the deck of his ship. A smile here, a nod there, a firm handshake with an important client. His name was Mr. Vance, and to everyone in the room, he was the very picture of what they all wanted to be: powerful, controlled, and unquestionably successful. He accepted a glass of water from a passing waiter, his own private rule: no alcohol until the last speech was made. He was always observing, always calculating, even at a party. Meanwhile, in the edges of the light, another man worked. His name was Leo. He wore simple, dark blue custodial clothes, a little worn at the elbows. He pushed a quiet cart with supplies, clean cloths, a spray bottle, a small vacuum. His movements were slow, careful, and utterly silent. While the party glittered, he performed his own familiar dance. He emptied bins half full of discarded napkins and toothpicks. He wiped down a perfectly clean table where someone had placed a sweating glass. He used a special, non-abrasive cloth to polish the brass handrail of the grand staircase, a small dot of focus in the sea of noise. Leo was a man of few words and many observations. He knew which executive liked their desk organizer positioned just so. He knew which young intern worked too late, surviving on instant noodles. He knew the night security guard's granddaughter had just learned to walk. His world was one of small, important details, unseen by most. His real world, the one that mattered more than anything, was waiting for him at home. A small, warm apartment 30 minutes away by bus, where his 7-year-old daughter would be right now, probably asleep on the couch. Cartoons still playing on the TV. She'd be waiting for him. A drawing of the two of them held in her little hand. His wife, her mother, had passed away 2 years ago after a long illness. The music had left their lives then, or so he had thought. Now his life was a careful, loving routine. Make the breakfast, walk her to school, work the night shift, come home, check her homework, read a story. Every moment was for her. His eyes, as he worked, kept drifting to the far corner of the atrium. There, sitting like a sleeping giant, was a grand piano. It was a beautiful, ebony black Steinway, bought by Mr. Vance himself as a statement piece. It spoke of culture and refinement. But in all the time Leo had worked there 3 years, he had rarely heard it played. Sometimes a hired musician for an event, or a brave, tipsy employee plinking out a few notes at a Christmas party. Its lid was almost always closed. To the executives, it was furniture. To Leo, it was a closed door. He finished wiping down a windowsill and glanced at the clock. 2 more hours. He could then catch the 10:45 bus. Across the room, near the open bar, a different kind of energy was brewing. 2 young executives, both in their late 20s, were feeling very pleased with themselves. The champagne was good, the party was buzzing, and they had just closed a decent-sized deal that afternoon. One of them, a man with a loud laugh and slicked-back hair, nudged his friend. "Look at old man Vance," he said, his words slightly slurry. "So serious. This party needs a wake-up call." His friend, thinner, with wire-rimmed glasses, smirked. "What do you have in mind? Put salt in his water glass?" No, something better. Something fun." His eyes scanned the room and landed on Leo. who was now carefully polishing the already spotless glass door of a conference room. The janitor was almost invisible against the backdrop of the party, a silent ghost in blue. An idea, cruel and sudden, flashed in the executive's mind. Him, the cleaner. His friend followed his gaze. What about him? Watch this. The first executive, whose name was Simon, drained his glass. The piano. Nobody ever plays it. It's just a big black joke. What if? What if we get the janitor to play it? For Vance, tell him the big boss requested it personally. Can you imagine? It'll be the funniest thing he's ever seen. The guy will probably play Twinkle Twinkle with one finger. The friend's eyes widened, a mix of alarm and amusement. He'll never do it. He'll say no. Not if we do it right. Not if we make it a public request. From the CEO himself. He can't say no to the boss, can he? In front of everyone? Simon grinned, the plan solidifying in his mind. It was perfect. A little moment of chaos. A joke at the expense of the one person in the room who wasn't in on it. It would be a story they'd tell for weeks. They watched as Mr. Vance finished a conversation and stood momentarily alone, surveying his kingdom. Simon straightened his tie. Okay, time for the show. He weaved through the crowd, his friend following behind, a nervous giggle already escaping his lips. Simon approached Leo, who had just put his cloth away and was preparing to move his cart to the next spot. Leo. Hey, Leo, Simon said, his voice overly friendly. Too loud. Leo turned, his expression neutral, polite. He knew this man. He was the one who always left coffee stains on the meeting room table. Good evening, sir. Leo. Big moment, Simon said, putting a hand on his own chest as if sharing a secret. Mr. Vance, you see him over there? He pointed dramatically at the CEO. He's heard something about you. He's heard you have a real gift. For the piano. Leo's posture stiffened, almost imperceptibly. His eyes, usually downcast, flicked up to meet Simon's. There was a quiet intensity there that Simon missed completely. Yeah, Simon barreled on, his smile plastered on. He's a big music lover, you know. He'd be personally honored, his word, personally honored, if he'd play a little something for the event. Kick the party up a notch. Leo's gaze shifted from Simon's grinning face to Mr. Vance, who was now looking in their direction, curious about the small commotion. He saw the two young executives talking animatedly to the janitor. Perhaps an employee had a special request? Not wanting to seem disconnected or dismissive, and assuming Leo had perhaps offered a song, Mr. Vance gave a small acknowledging nod. It was a vague gesture, but in the context of Simon's lie, it looked like a royal command. The thin friend snorted, covering his mouth with his hand. Leo was trapped. The eyes of the people nearby were on him. A few had overheard. A whisper spread. The janitor's going to play the piano? It was a statement filled with bewildered curiosity. To say no to what seemed like a direct, public request from the CEO would be unthinkable. A career-ending act of defiance for a man who couldn't afford to lose his job. He looked at the piano. The closed, black lid seemed to taunt him. A lifetime ago, it had been his life. Now, it was just a piece of wood and wire, a symbol of a past he had locked away to build a present for his daughter. His hands, rough from work and cleaning chemicals, curled slightly at his sides. I'm not really prepared, Leo said softly, his voice almost lost in the murmur of the party. Ah, don't be modest. Simon boomed, clapping him on the shoulder. Mr. Vance is waiting. Don't keep the boss waiting. With a final pleading glance that no one caught or understood, Leo took a slow, deep breath. He nodded, just once. He turned and began the long walk across the wide atrium floor, away from the safety of his cart and his invisibility, toward the shining, silent piano. Every step echoed in the suddenly attentive quiet that had fallen over that section of the room. The prank was in motion. The show, they all thought, was about to begin. The walk across the atrium floor felt like the longest journey of his life. The soft carpet did nothing to muffle the sound of his own heartbeat in his ears. He was aware of every single eye on him. He saw the curious stares, the raised eyebrows, the polite smiles hiding confusion. He felt the heat of their attention, like a physical weight on his shoulders, heavier than any trash bag he had ever hauled. He kept his eyes fixed on the piano. It was a beautiful instrument. He could tell even from afar. The black lacquer was a mirror, reflecting the blurred shapes of the party lights and the moving crowd. As he got closer, he could see the fine layer of dust on the closed lid. He had cleaned around it every night, but he was never allowed to touch the instrument itself. That was a rule. The piano was for the hired professionals. The two young executives trailed a few steps behind him, trying and failing to hide their smirks. The one with the slicked-back hair, Simon, gave a little wave to a colleague across the room, as if to say, "Watch this." They positioned themselves near the front, ready for the best view of the coming embarrassment. Mr. Vance, from his spot near the center of the room, watched with growing interest. He had seen the nod he gave being interpreted as something more. He saw the janitor's hesitant walk. He was not a cruel man, but he was a practical one. If an employee, even a custodial one, had a talent and wanted to contribute to the evening's atmosphere, he saw no harm in it. It showed initiative. He folded his arms, his face an unreadable mask of polite expectation. He prepared to listen to a simple, perhaps shaky, rendition of a popular song. He would applaud, thank the man, and that would be that. A small human moment in a night of corporate formalities. Leo finally reached the piano. He stopped in front of the bench. For a long moment, he just stood there, looking at it. The crowd's murmur died down to a whisper, then to an almost complete silence. The only sounds were the distant clink from the bar and the low hum of the air conditioning. He was thinking of his daughter. He pictured her face, not as it was now, but as a tiny baby in her mother's arms. Her mother, who had eyes that crinkled when she laughed. She was the one who had pushed him to keep playing, even when life got hard. "It's not just in your fingers, love," she would say. Asterisk, "it's in here." She'd tap his chest. Then she got sick, and the music slowly faded from their home, replaced by the beeps of machines and a crushing quiet. He thought of the last time he had played properly. It was for her, in her hospital room. A small keyboard he'd brought in. Something soft. She had fallen asleep to it. He hadn't touched a key since the day of her funeral. It felt like closing a book he would never have the heart to open again. A soft, nervous giggle escaped from somewhere in the crowd. It broke his trance. Slowly, carefully, he pulled the piano bench out. It made a small scraping sound on the floor that echoed in the quiet room. He sat down. The leather of the bench was cool. He stared at the closed lid, this barrier between his past and his present. With a deliberate slowness that made a few people shift uncomfortably, he reached out. His hands, which moments before had been holding a cleaning cloth, now hovered over the polished wood. His fingers were not the long, elegant fingers of a concert pianist. They were strong, with short nails, a small healing cut on the knuckle of his right thumb from a broken glass he'd handled days before. He saw the faint trace of ingrained grime that never quite washed out from the creases of his skin, a permanent tattoo of his work. He took a deep, slow breath that shuddered slightly as he let it out. Then, with a movement that was almost reverent, he lifted the heavy lid. It opened with a soft creak, revealing the perfect ivory row of keys. They gleamed under the spotlight, waiting. He didn't put his hands on them immediately. Instead, He stretched his fingers out, flexing them, as if waking them up from a long, long sleep. He let his fingertips brush the very tops of the keys, not pressing down, just feeling the smooth, cool surface. It was a familiar sensation, one that sent a jolt of memory through him, so sharp it almost hurt Dot. The two executives by the front were barely containing themselves now. The thinner one had his phone out, discreetly held low, ready to record the train wreck. "Here it comes," Simon whispered, his voice a low buzz of anticipation. Leo closed his eyes. The noise of the party, the weight of the stairs, the pressure of the lie, it all started to fade away. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he wasn't in a corporate atrium. He was in a small, sunlit practice room years ago. He could smell the old wood and dust. He could hear his teacher's voice, gentle and firm. He could feel the simple, overwhelming joy of making something beautiful appear from silence. His shoulders, which had been hunched up near his ears with tension, slowly relaxed. His back straightened. Something in his posture changed. The man who had looked so uncomfortable, so out of place, seemed to settle into the bench as if he had been born to sit there. Then he began. The first note was a single deep, resonant chord from the lower register. It wasn't loud, but it was full. It vibrated in the air, a clear, solid sound that cut through the last of the whispers. It was not the hesitant plink of a beginner. It was the confident statement of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. A few people in the audience blinked, their expressions shifting from amusement to surprise. His left hand settled into a gentle, rolling rhythm, a pattern that was like a slow, steady heartbeat. It was warm and comforting. Then, with his right hand, he began the melody. The notes were high and clear, each one ringing like a tiny, perfect bell. They flowed one into the other, a river of sound that was both incredibly sad and unbearably sweet. Dot. It was Chopin's Nocturne. But to anyone listening, it didn't matter what it was called. What mattered was the story it told. You didn't need to know music to hear it. You could hear the longing in the gentle rise and fall of the phrases. You could hear a love so deep it ached in the way the notes held on, then reluctantly let go. There were moments of quiet hope, little flashes of light in the minor key, like remembering a happy dream. Then the melody would turn again, weighted with a loss so profound it made the air feel thick. Simon's smirk had vanished. His mouth was slightly open. The phone in his friend's hand was forgotten, hanging limply at his side. They weren't looking at each other for shared laughter anymore. They were just staring, stunned, at the man they had tried to mock. Mr. Vance's arms slowly unfolded. He took a half-step forward, his head tilted. The polite expectation was gone from his face, replaced by deep concentration. He was a man who understood excellence, who could recognize mastery in any field. This was not a party trick. This was art. But more than the technical skill, the flawless timing, the delicate touch, it was the raw emotion pouring from the instrument that held him motionless. He heard more than notes. He heard a heart breaking, and somehow, still finding the courage to sing. Leo was gone. The janitor was gone. Only the music remained. His eyes were still closed, his face a landscape of feeling. A single line of tension appeared between his brows, not from strain, but from the depth of what he was pulling up from inside himself. His hands moved with a sure, graceful economy, no wasted motion. The sad, beautiful song filled every corner of the vast room, wrapping around the listeners, pulling them into a world of memory and feeling they hadn't expected to visit tonight. Near the back, an older woman from accounting, who had lost her husband the previous year, felt her eyes well up with tears. She didn't wipe them away. A young intern, stressed and lonely in the big city, felt a strange sense of comfort. The music understood. And Mr. Vance, the powerful, controlled CEO, felt something crack inside his own carefully maintained shell. The music bypassed his mind and went straight to a place he kept guarded. It reminded him of his father, a stern, quiet man who had only ever softened when listening to his old records on a Sunday afternoon. He thought of missed conversations, of time lost forever to the pursuit of things that suddenly felt less important. A tight, hot pressure built behind his own eyes. He fought it, blinking rapidly, but he couldn't look away from the man at the piano, whose simple blue uniform now seemed like a disguise for a hidden prince of sorrow and beauty. The last section of the nocturne began. A return of the main melody, even more tender and heartbreaking than before. Leo played it like a final, loving goodbye. The final notes, soft as a sigh, faded into the silence from which they came. His hands came to rest, gentle on the keys. He opened his eyes. He looked down at his own rough fingers, as if surprised to find them there. For 5 full seconds, the room was utterly, completely silent. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, as if waking from a collective dream, the applause began. The silence held for a heartbeat, then 2. It wasn't an empty quiet, but a thick, full one, heavy with the echo of the music that had just finished. The final gentle chord seemed to linger in the air, a ghost of the feeling it had created. Then, one person near the front began to clap. It was a slow, deliberate sound. Then another joined, and another. Within seconds, the polite clapping erupted into something else entirely, a roaring, thunderous wave of applause. It wasn't the kind of applause you give after a nice presentation or a decent speech. This was louder, warmer, filled with genuine shock and awe. People were not just using their hands. Some were whistling, others were calling out, "Bravo!" It was the kind of sound that usually only happened for a celebrity performer, not for the quiet man who emptied the trash. Leo blinked, coming back to himself as if surfacing from deep water. The noise of the applause crashed over him, replacing the world of memory and music. He looked up, and for the first time, he truly saw the crowd. Their faces were not mocking or amused anymore. They were open, amazed, some even tearful. He saw the woman from accounting dabbing her eyes with a cocktail napkin. He saw the young intern staring with a look of pure admiration. The shock of it, the sheer force of their positive reaction, was almost more overwhelming than the fear that had come before. A flush of heat crept up his neck. He wasn't used to being seen, let alone celebrated. His instinct was to shrink, to get up, close the lid, and disappear back into the walls. He placed his hands in his lap, looking down at them as if they belonged to someone else. His gaze swept across the crowd and landed on the 2 young executives who had set this whole thing in motion. They were still standing at the front, but they were not clapping. Simon, the one with the slicked-back hair, looked like he'd been hit by a truck. His face was pale, his mouth a thin, tight line. All his smug confidence had drained away, replaced by a dawning horror as he realized the magnitude of what he'd done. He hadn't orchestrated a joke. He had accidentally staged a revelation. His friend just looked down at his shoes, unable to meet anyone's eyes, his shoulders hunched as if trying to make himself smaller. Then, Leo's eyes found Mr. Vance. The CEO was walking. He was moving through the crowd, which parted for him naturally. He wasn't clapping anymore either. His hands were at his sides, his expression unreadable. His sharp eyes were fixed directly on Leo. There was no smile on his face, but there was a fierce intensity in his look, a deep, searching focus. Leo felt a fresh spike of anxiety. This was it, the moment of judgment. He had been tricked into playing, but maybe he had overstepped. Maybe the boss was angry at the disruption, at the spectacle. Maybe he thought Leo was showing off. The applause started to die down as people saw Mr. Vance approaching, curiosity silencing them once more. The CEO stopped a few feet from the piano. He looked at Leo for a long moment. Then he did something no one expected. He gave a slow, deep, respectful nod. It wasn't a casual tilt of the head. It was an acknowledgement, man to man. "Thank you," Mr. Vance said. His voice was quiet, but in the new silence, it carried clearly. It wasn't his CEO voice, booming and assured. It was lower, more personal. That was extraordinary. He paused, seeming to choose his words with great care. "I have heard that piece played many times in many concert halls. I have never heard it played like that." He took a step closer. "Where did you learn to play with such feeling?" All eyes were on Leo. He cleared his throat, his own voice feeling rough and unused. "A long time ago, sir," he said softly. Before life changed." Mr. Vance nodded again, as if that answer explained everything. He could see the man's discomfort, the way he wanted to be anywhere but here. He understood the profound privacy he had just witnessed being invaded. His own cheek still felt the strange cool path where that single unbidden tear had traveled. He had not cried in public since he was a boy. The music had reached something in him he kept buried under spreadsheets and board meetings, the memory of his own father's silent grief, the regrets of time spent chasing the wrong things. He knew, with absolute certainty, that this had not been the man's idea. The pieces clicked into place. The nervous approach, the look of trapped panic, the smirking executives now looking like they wanted the floor to swallow them. This had been a setup. A cruel joke that had backfired in the most beautiful way imaginable. Mr. Vance felt a slow burn of anger start in his chest, but he pushed it down. This was not the moment for that. This was the moment for the man at the piano. "Would you play something else?" Mr. Vance asked, and it was a real question, not a command. "Something of your own choosing?" Leo looked at him, really looked at him. He saw the intensity, but he didn't see mockery or pity. He saw a kind of hungry understanding. The panic began to recede, just a little. He thought of his daughter. He thought of the small melody he would hum to her when she couldn't sleep, the one he had slowly turned into a proper tune on the cheap keyboard they had at home. He nodded, almost imperceptibly. He turned back to the piano. This time he didn't close his eyes. He looked at the keys, a small, private smile touching the corners of his mouth. This song was for her. It was simple. It wasn't a famous classical piece. It was a lullaby. He began to play. The notes were soft, gentle, like a rocking motion. The melody was sweet and uncomplicated, full of warmth and safety. It spoke of bedtime stories and nightlights, of gentle kisses on foreheads, and the promise of morning. It was the absolute opposite of the sorrowful nocturne. This was a song of pure, protective love. As he played, his posture changed again. The last of the tension left his shoulders. He wasn't playing for a crowd or a CEO anymore. He was playing for a little girl in a small apartment, hopefully still asleep on the couch, waiting for him to come home. The love in the room was almost tangible. Mr. Vance listened, and his stern expression softened further. He didn't have children of his own. His company had been his child. But this simple music spoke of a different kind of creation, a different kind of legacy. It was humbling. When the lullaby ended, fading out to a whisper, the applause came again, softer this time, more touched. Mr. Vance extended his hand. "I am Alistair Vance," he said, which everyone knew, but in saying it, he was introducing himself as a person, not just a title. Leo hesitated, then wiped his hand quickly on his pants again before reaching out. The CEO's grip was firm, but not crushing. "Leo, sir, I work the night shift." "I know," Mr. Vance said. Then he did something that made a soft gasp ripple through the crowd. He gestured to a small, empty table near the piano. "Leo, Would you join me for a few minutes? I would like to talk. Leo's heart thumped. Talk? About what? He glanced at his cart, still parked far across the room, a symbol of his real place here. My shift isn't over, sir. I have the East Wing to. It can wait, Mr. Vance said, and his tone left no room for argument, though it wasn't unkind. Please. Feeling like he was in a dream, Leo stood up from the piano bench. He gently closed the lid over the keys, a final, quiet goodbye. Then he followed the most powerful man in the building to the small table, aware of hundreds of eyes watching their every move. He could see Simon and his friend slinking away towards the exit. Their night of fun utterly ruined. As they sat, a server appeared instantly. Mr. Vance ordered a coffee. He looked at Leo. Anything for you? Coffee? Water? Something to eat? Leo just shook his head. No, thank you, sir. I'm fine. When the server left, an island of quiet surrounded them in the still buzzing room. Mr. Vance leaned forward, his elbows on the table, steepling his fingers. He looked directly at Leo. Now, he said, his voice low, tell me what really happened tonight. And then, if you're willing, tell me about the music. The noise of the party seemed to fade into a distant hum around their small table. Leo felt like he was in the eye of a hurricane, a pocket of strange calm, while a whirlwind of whispers and glances swirled around them. The CEO's coffee arrived, a small, elegant cup on a saucer. The rich smell of it was foreign in this context, a scent from a different world. Mr. Vance didn't touch his drink. He just waited, his eyes steady on Leo's face. It wasn't a stare meant to intimidate. It was patient, expectant. He was giving the man space to find his words. Leo looked down at his own hands, resting on the clean tablecloth. They were clean, but the work was etched into them, the small scars, the calluses in different places than a pianist would have. He took a slow breath. The initial shock was wearing off, leaving behind a dull tiredness and the lingering echoes of the music in his bones. They asked me to play. Leo began, his voice low. He didn't look up. The two young men. From the marketing floor, I think. They said you had requested it, personally. They said you'd heard I had a gift. He almost choked on the word. I saw you nod. So I thought. I nodded because I saw a commotion and assumed you had volunteered. Mr. Vance finished, his tone flat. I did not make any request. He let that hang in the air for a moment. The confirmation of the prank was clear. I am sorry you were put in that position. The apology, simple and direct, surprised Leo. He glanced up. It's all right, sir. It is not, Mr. Vance said, and there was a flicker of that earlier anger, quickly banked. But we will address that later. First, I want to understand. The first piece? Chopin's Nocturne. You played it not just with skill, but with a pain I could feel in this room. The second piece. That was yours? Leo nodded. For my daughter. It's a lullaby I made for her. She is lucky, Mr. Vance said quietly. He took a sip of his coffee, then set it down carefully. That level of artistry. It is not something you forget. It is not a hobby. What was your life before the night shift? And so, haltingly at first, then in a quiet, steady stream, Leo told him. He spoke of the music school he attended as a young man, full of big dreams that got smaller and more practical as time went on. He spoke of meeting his wife, who was his brightest audience, and how he became a music teacher, which didn't pay much but filled his heart. He described the small, happy chaos of their lives, the joy that was their daughter. Then his voice grew quieter, tighter. He spoke of the diagnosis, the slow, grinding terror of a long illness, the medical bills that grew like shadows. Teaching private lessons in the evenings wasn't enough. The stable job with stable hours and, most importantly, the health insurance for his family. That was what mattered. The custodial position at Ethelgerd had come up. The hours were nights, which meant he could be home for his daughter during the day, take her to school, care for his wife. He took it without a second thought. The piano. It got packed away with a lot of other things, Leo said, his gaze fixed on a point far away. It wasn't a choice, really. It just faded out. There was no room for it. After she passed, it felt like the music went with her. I haven't played for anyone in over 2 years. Not seriously. Just little things for my girl at home. Mr. Vance listened without interrupting. He didn't nod sympathetically or make pitying sounds. He just absorbed the story. His own life, a relentless climb from business school to the corner office, seemed sterile and bloodless in comparison. This man had traded his art, his passion, for duty and love. He had chosen the well-being of his family over the song in his own soul. The integrity of that choice, the sheer weight of it, humbled Vance deeply. His own tears at the music now made perfect, heartbreaking sense. You play for your daughter, Vance stated, sometimes, on a small keyboard. She likes it. She asks about her mom when I play the sad one. The Chopin. Leo managed a small, fragile smile. She says it sounds like a remembery. A remembery, Vance repeated softly. She is exactly right. There was another stretch of silence. The party was winding down. People were starting to leave, but they all cast long, curious looks at the two men still talking at the small table, the CEO in his tailored suit and the janitor in his simple blues. What would you do, Mr. Vance asked, leaning forward again, if your circumstances were different? If you didn't have to think about the insurance or the stability? Would you go back to teaching? Performing? Leo was quiet for a long time. He had locked that question away so long ago it had rusted shut. I don't know, sir, he said truthfully. The teaching. I love the kids. Seeing them get it. But that life? It's uncertain. My daughter needs certain. She needs me home at night. This job. It gives me that. He said it without bitterness. It was just a fact, as solid and unchangeable as the floor beneath their feet. Mr. Vance nodded slowly. He understood. A flashy offer a role as a company pianist, some made-up title, would be an insult. It would upend the careful, loving stability this man had built out of rubble. It would be for Vance's own benefit, to feel like a savior, not for Leo's or his daughter's. He finished his coffee, his mind working. The anger at the pranksters was still there, but it had been reshaped into something more useful, a sense of responsibility. This man's talent was a hidden light in his company, and his sacrifice was a lesson in what really mattered. He could not, and would not, disrupt the careful balance of Leo's life. But he could honor it. He could build something around it that respected its boundaries. I have 2 things to say. Leo, Mr. Vance said, his tone becoming formal, but not cold. It was his decision-making voice. First, the individuals responsible for that charade will be dealt with formally. That is a promise. What they did was a profound violation of respect, and it does not reflect the values of this company. You have my personal apology on behalf of Ethelgerd. Leo just nodded, not knowing what to say to that. Second, Vance continued, your daughter, the one who listens to your remembering music, her future. What does she like? Does she draw, sing, play sports? The question surprised Leo. She draws all the time, and she dances. In the living room, she has this energy to her, like she needs to make things. A genuine smile, the first one all night that reached his eyes, touched Mr. Vance's lips. Good, then here is what I would like to do. He paused, ensuring every word was clear. I am establishing a new fund for employee dependents, a talent and arts fund, for lessons, for equipment, for camps, music, art, dance, writing, so that the dreams of the children in this company's family don't have to fade away because life gets hard. He looked directly at Leo. I would be honored if your daughter would be the first beneficiary. It would be a privilege for us to help support whatever making she wants to do. Leo stared at him. His mind couldn't quite process it. It wasn't a handout for him. It wasn't a pity job. It was a door opened for his little girl, a path for her creativity that he couldn't currently provide. It was a gift that honored his sacrifice without undoing it. The tightness in his chest, a constant companion for years, loosened just a fraction. I don't know what to say, Leo stammered, his voice thick. You don't have to say anything, Mr. Vance said. He stood up, signaling the conversation was coming to a close. Talk to her. See what she might like. Then, have her draw me a picture of it. My assistant will send you the details next week. He extended his hand once more. Thank you again for the music and for the conversation. Leo stood and shook his hand, the grip still firm, still respectful. And Leo, Mr. Vance added, as the janitor turned to go back to his cart, his shift not yet done. The piano lid. It stays open from now on. Consider it part of your rounds to keep it tuned. And if the spirit moves you, play for yourself. For anyone listening, this building could use more rememberies. He gave a final nod, then turned and walked away, leaving Leo standing alone by the piano, the open lid reflecting not just the party lights, but a future that felt, for the first time in a very long time, a little bit lighter. The gala ended. The last of the guests drifted out into the night, their conversations buzzing with the one story everyone would remember. The cleanup crew, a different team from the day shift, moved in to collect the rented glassware and fold the tables. Leo finished his rounds in the East Wing, the familiar routine of wiping, emptying, and sweeping helping to ground him after the surreal whirlwind of the evening. The silence of the empty building was a comfort. He clocked out just after midnight. The night air was cool on his face as he walked to the bus stop. The city was quiet. He replayed the night in his head, not the music, but the conversation. The CEO's words. The fund for his daughter. It felt like a dream, too fragile to be real. When he pushed open the door to his apartment, the soft glow of the living room lamp greeted him. There she was, his little girl, curled up on the couch just as he'd pictured. She was asleep, her favorite stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm, a colorful drawing of a giant piano with a stick-figure man playing it resting on her chest. His heart squeezed. He gently picked her up, her small body warm and heavy with sleep. She stirred, mumbling, "Daddy, did you play the big piano?" "I did, sweetheart," he whispered, carrying her to her bed. "Was it good?" She murmured, already fading again. "It was okay," he said softly, tucking the covers around her. "Go back to sleep." Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The following Monday, the atmosphere at Ethelgerd was different. It was subtle, but Leo felt it. As he went about his daytime errands, grocery shopping, fixing a leaky faucet, people in the building looked at him, not with pity or curiosity, but with a new kind of respect. A few said, "Good morning, Leo," using his name, which they never had before. The woman from accounting stopped him in the hall and simply touched his arm, giving it a gentle squeeze. No words were needed. He heard the rumors, of course. The two executives, Simon and his friend, had been placed on a month of unpaid leave, pending a formal review for gross unprofessionalism and creating a hostile work environment. They were not fired, but the message was clear. what they had done was not a harmless prank. It had consequences. The story of the CEO's tears and the janitor's sonata had already become company legend, a warning against judgment and a testament to hidden depth. A week later, a formal cream-colored envelope arrived at Leo's locker. It was from the CEO's office. Inside was a letter on thick paper detailing the Ethelgerd Family Arts Fellowship. It was real. It outlined a yearly grant for qualifying dependents for lessons, materials, or programs. Attached was a simple form and a note in neat handwriting. A drawing will suffice for the application. A.V. That evening, Leo sat at their small kitchen table with his daughter. He explained it to her as simply as he could. Remember the big piano at Daddy's work? The boss there, Mr. Vance, he liked your idea about remembering music. He wants to help kids who like to make things, like you with your drawings and your dancing. He said you could pick something to learn. Anything you want. Her eyes, wide and bright, looked at him. Anything? Anything within reason, monkey. What do you think? She didn't hesitate. Ballet, she said. I want to wear the pink shoes and spin. So she drew a picture. It was of a girl in a puffy pink dress, spinning in a shower of musical notes. Leo helped her fill out the form, and they mailed it in. Asterisk, 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 a month passed. Life returned to its familiar rhythm school, work, bedtime stories. But small things had changed. The lid of the grand piano in the atrium remained open, as promised. A local tuner came every fortnight, and Leo would often be the one to let him in, sharing a quiet word, sometimes during his night shifts. When the building was empty and the only sound was the hum of the servers, Leo would stop by the piano. He wouldn't play the big, emotional pieces. He'd play scales, gentle exercises. He'd fiddle with new ideas for lullabies. Once he played a jappy, silly tune from an old cartoon his daughter loved. The sound echoed in the empty space, a private joy. One lunchtime, as employees sat in the atrium eating their sandwiches, Leo was dusting the bass of the piano. A young woman from the IT department, braver than the rest, approached. Leo, could you play something? Just something small? It's so quiet in here. He looked up surprised. He saw no mockery in her face, just a hopeful request. He glanced around. A few others had looked up from their phones, their interest clear. He nodded, sat down, and played the simple, sweet lullaby he'd written, the one he'd played for Mr. Vance. When he finished, there was a soft smattering of applause, and people went back to their lunches, the atmosphere in the room noticeably warmer, lighter. It became an occasional thing, not a performance, just a moment of shared peace. Asterisk, 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 the first ballet lesson arrived. Leo took his daughter to a reputable studio downtown, paid for by the fellowship grant. He watched through the window as she stood in a line of other little girls, clutching the bar, her face a mask of fierce concentration. She was clumsy, off balance, but her eyes shone. When she came out, she didn't stop talking about it all the way home. That night, after she was asleep, Leo sat in his living room. The quiet apartment was filled with her drawings, taped to the walls pink dancers, grand pianos, happy sons. He felt a profound sense of rightness. He had not gotten his old life back. The sorrow for his wife was a quiet room he would always carry inside him. But he had built a good life from the pieces, a stable, loving life. And now, because of a cruel joke that had backfired, a door had opened for his daughter. Her world would be bigger, her chances brighter. That was a gift beyond any salary or job title. One evening, working late on a special cleaning project, Leo saw Mr. Vance leaving his office. It was after hours. The CEO looked tired, his shoulders slightly slumped under his expensive coat. He was alone. He walked across the atrium, his footsteps echoing. He stopped by the piano, as he often did now. He didn't play. He just looked at it. Leo, holding a bin liner, hesitated. Then he walked over. "Good evening, sir." Mr. Vance turned. The tiredness was still in his face, but it softened when he saw Leo. "Leo, good evening. How is the budding ballerina?" "She loves it, sir. She practices her plies in the kitchen." "Thank you, truly." "No," Mr. Vance said, shaking his head. "Thank you." He looked back at the piano. "This," he said, gesturing to the open instrument, "and the fund. They are reminders. For me, to remember what we build for and who we are outside these walls." He gave a short, almost shy smile. "I approved the new graphics package today. Millions of dollars. It was fine, competent. I've already forgotten it. But I still remember that lullaby." He patted the edge of the piano once, a solid final sound. "You get home to your daughter, Leo. The dust will wait." Leo nodded. "Good night, sir. Good night." As Leo finished his work and headed for the bus, he thought about the symphony of the building. The day shift with its meetings and ambitions. The night shift with its quiet maintenance. The flash of talent where you least expected it. The slow, steady beat of love and responsibility. It was all connected. He was still the janitor. He chose to be. It was the role that let him be the father he needed to be. But now, he was also the man who sometimes played the piano at lunch. The man whose daughter was taking ballet. The man who had reminded a powerful CEO of the music in everyday life. He arrived home. His daughter was waiting, eager to show him a new spin she'd been practicing. He watched her, this joyful, spinning heart of his world, and knew that every silent night of work, every note played from a place of memory or love, was part of the same beautiful, unfinished song.